Healthy people run screaming from avoidant partners, but there's something about neglect in childhood that primes you to fall harder for someone when they constantly pull you in and then push you away. And at first, you're clear-headed that what they're doing is emotionally abusive and selfish. But if it keeps going hardcore and you keep hoping that this time will be different, your thinking and perception will start to grind down until you actually believe that they are the victim and you are causing them to emotionally hurt you. My letter today is from a woman I'll call Taran, and she writes, "Hi, Anna. My childhood wasn't exactly a walk in the park. My little sister has severe autism and learning disabilities. I'm the middle child, and my parents argued a lot, and I heard the word debt thrown around frequently. I developed generalized anxiety disorder, among other things, but this isn't about me." All right, I've got my fairy pencil. I'm going to circle some things I want to come back to on a second reading, but let's see what's going on in Taran's letter here. She says, "I met my ex 5 years before we dated. I found his dog, and he asked me for coffee. I found out he had a girlfriend, but they were on a break. He didn't tell me. I did some internet sleuthing, and I had someone too. We had an instant connection and then had to stop talking because it wasn't fair. 5 years later, and we had both become single, and he reached out to me. I felt like he was a bit of a player, and I didn't take it too seriously. But he began messaging me every day, all day, from first waking up until when he got into bed at night. I fell for him pretty hard, even though there were red flags. After 4 months of talking all day, every day, acting like a couple, dinners with his family, and having sex, I asked what we were, and he flipped. He said after his last relationship with an apparently abusive, crazy girlfriend, he wasn't sure he was ready. I said I'm not the type of girl to be casual. So I went to walk away, and he cried, and he told me not to go and said he'd try. And he then changed his mind and said give him 2 days to decide. He came back to me after 1, and then he changed his mind and said, can we do no labels? Goodness. Well, I went along with it, says Taran, because I was so in love with him, and the push-pull of no contact and does he want me had destroyed me. All right, I'm circling that word, destroy, because it comes up again in this letter. A few months later, he declared we were official in his head, though nothing had been said to me. Official in his head, okay. And then lockdown happened, and to not be apart, I asked about staying with him and his mother, and he sheepishly agreed. Living together was blissful. Not one row. We showered together, cuddled all night as we slept, and he would play his games while I painted. Harmonious. Then in March, a little over a year since we started seeing each other, and 7 months since he considered it official, he was moving, and I had to move back home as there was no space. And there's no explanation for what happened there. I was longing to say, I love you, and he hadn't said it. I didn't say it first because he had freaked out previously, but to me, a year was too long after his indecision before, and it was hurting me. I said, I feel like we're not on the same page, and if not, I need to be out. He said, of course he loves me. Cut to 2 months later, he told me he felt ultimatumed, and like I pushed him, and he didn't know if he'd ever felt love. Okay, the pattern is emerging, huh? I said he had to get therapy and figure it out, to which he agreed. Ah, yes, the magic of therapy in our minds. I asked him every month or so if he had found any, and he hadn't even looked for a therapist, I guess. He then told me he did love me, but he couldn't say it. I made it clear it was important for me to hear, and he said he'd try. 3 years went by, and he never said it. But on top of it, he only wanted to see me 2 or 3 times a week. He moved into a massive apartment, and he didn't ask me to move in. We were in our mid-30s. And he always put his hobbies before booking time with me. He did lovely things, too, like be affectionate, care for me when I was ill, cuddle me through the night, cook for us. But by then I was so worn down, I was destroyed. I told you that word was coming up twice. She said she was destroyed. I'm circling it because, Taran, I want you to remember that's actually what you said about how you felt in this relationship. I would watch a film and someone would say, I love you, and it killed me. I always wanted to know where we were headed. And he refused to talk about the future, which, by the way, is an answer, Taran. And he said he wouldn't think about it. During our 3.5-year relationship, he went no contact to decide if he wanted me about 5 times. Okay. His dad died when he was 20 after having cancer since my ex was 6, so he grew up with trauma. I know he never dealt with it, and I wonder if I should have been more patient, or maybe he just wasn't ready for me. We ended up imploding last summer when I couldn't take it anymore, but he ended it with me. He said we weren't compatible. I miss him still every day and don't think I'll love anyone the way I loved him. I've never understood why he couldn't tell me he loved me. I didn't ask for it all the time, only every now and then. I was so open and patient, and he just kept using that kindness and doing nothing. The last argument we had, he said we could move in together in a year, but by then, that was too little too late. Did I break this? Taran asks. I see this pattern a lot, Taran. And no, you didn't break it. But that part where you actually believe it was you is kind of proof positive that you've now adopted kind of a sick mindset that is undermining you, where you think you broke a relationship with somebody who's done nothing but hold you at arm's length, right? So you have this idea of how the relationship could be that you were able to develop from all these nice experiences with him. But I'll tell you what he is. He is a classic avoidant. And there's a classic behavior you're doing here, like when you bring up his trauma, where you say he never dealt with his dad's death, or you say he needs to get therapy. You know, if I had a nickel for every time I get a letter from somebody who's with somebody who's not that into them and very avoidant and not giving them what they want, where they believe that if they could just get the person to go to therapy, the love would be there, well, I'd have a lot of nickels. It's what we do. It's what we do. We try to rationalize anything but facing the fact that we are not being loved the way that we require to feel okay in a relationship. It destroys us. And so if you grew up with trauma, it seems very logical that if you could just shut down your needs and be more understanding, or if other people would just go to therapy, that the love would show up. We're so good at seeing the potential for love. You know, but we're pretty bad at recognizing when love is just not happening. You were not being loved. Somebody who has to break up with you to think if they want you and go no contact 5 times, there's obviously a thing there. Now, I think it's avoidance, and I don't want you to get all hopeful about that, because just because there's a name for it doesn't mean that somebody who's not totally working on it could change. It doesn't tend to change. People who really want to change could do it if they want to. But how you know they want to is that without you asking them or nagging them or pushing them, they decide to get involved in things that help them. Their behavior changes. And not just when you walk out the door. And not just when they're lonely 6 months later. They do it every day. And when they're being avoidant and they can't deal with you and they're shutting down, this thing where, if you go, look it up, put it in Chat GPT, what is avoidance? And that is exactly one of the things. Can't say I love you. They might feel like they do, but they can't say it. They don't want to commit to it. Living together is terrible. And I can, what I feel for you is like during the lockdown when you moved in and you said it was blissful, but you didn't have I love you, you didn't have commitment. And so on some level, I sense that, you didn't actually have any security there. You had the security of outside circumstances, and luckily the lockdown didn't go on forever. And once the choices were there, I don't know, he moved. So you weren't his priority. And I can only, commiserate with you. That must have been horrible for you after all you were investing in the relationship. But I want to call to your attention that you jumped in to live with a guy who wouldn't say he loved you, who had no commitment to you. I think I can certainly speak from my own experience, but I wouldn't recommend to anybody that they just move in with people, on so little evidence that it was a real lasting thing. The trouble with living with people is all your security is wrapped up into dealing with the relationship successfully. So if they're not giving love or they're putting you through the ringer, you lose everything when you want to step away from it. So it's a huge disincentive. And if you have attachment wounds that make stepping back hard anyway, then it's kind of setting yourself up for a deep trauma, reactivation when you have to move out. So I feel for you on that. And I encourage you to just get very real about this, that you can actually date more slowly. That is like the core thing that I teach in my dating course. And you can start to learn what would be the signs that somebody was serious about me in the way that I actually require. You can actually get clear with yourself what you require. And how would you know if somebody felt that way? And it would never be in the absence of them expressly saying it. Now, we all know that people can say things they don't mean, and that's why it takes time. It takes time to observe their behavior and the stuff that upsets them and the stuff that triggers them to sort of run away for a while and how they come back and what they say. We need time to take that in. Now, if you have an attachment wound, you're probably prone to rushing into relationships and getting all bonded quickly. And having sex quickly in a relationship can feel like, the solution to the anxiety that comes up that they don't love you, because it can create it just like it kind of tells your body, it's like, oh, no, we're together. But then the rude awakening, right? That it didn't mean what it felt like. It didn't mean what it felt like. And that is crushing. That's what's destroying, is to be so vulnerable to somebody and hopeful and have yourself and your future invested in them, but then to not get back. Now, the way he was acting, I don't think it was ever a shock that he didn't have that to give. He was sort of signaling it all along. And just because somebody cuddles you in the night or takes care of you when you're sick doesn't mean they've made a commitment to be with you and to work through tough times. It's not the same thing. So cuddling is not... It's not like terrible crumbs. It's something, but it's nothing like a commitment. And so avoidance, they need a little bit of love and connection, and a sex life, a little bit, and they cannot handle very much. And it for somebody who does want that relationship and closeness and literally intimacy, not as a euphemism for sex, but to be really close with somebody and trust each other, to have that, avoidance are not a good bet. Now, if you're in a relationship, if anybody's listening and you're in a relationship with somebody who's avoidant and you want to make a go of it, you both have to work at it. You both do, at meeting halfway. And it's possible to do that. But for you, Taran, this is your ex. And so when you're ready for a new relationship, before you actually make any steps in that direction, I urge you to look at my list of red flags to look for when you're dating somebody. I know you know this, but sometimes we need it spelled out, just in black and white. Here it is. Trauma in your childhood gives you a blind spot that makes it easy to become attached to people who are avoidant. They pull away when you try to pull close. They don't get it about being present for someone or honoring them on special occasions. Avoidant people can do some parts of relationships really well, but over time, they can leave you feeling neglected, disrespected, and alone. But what is it about them that makes it feel, at first at least, that it works so well? Is there something about their indifference that is helpful to those of us with trauma? Is it even possible to be happy when someone seems to intentionally disappoint you all the time? My letter is from a woman I'll call Marilyn, and she writes, "Hi, Anna. I'm writing to you to get clarity over a strong recurring issue I seem to have in my marriage. I'm 30 years old, married for 10 years to a really wonderful guy who does all the right things. He makes decent money. We bought a house last year and were able to decorate it beautifully, which was a big achievement for us. All right, I've got the fairy pencil. I'm going to go through and circle things I want to come back to. But let's go through and see what's happening for Marilyn. We have 2 young children, a little girl and a baby boy. My husband provides much stability for us as a family in all ways I really cannot fault him. However, there are times when my husband seems really distracted, really lost in his own world, and I will try to make bids of connection, like offer him a drink, ask him how he's doing, or just sit next to him, or make a comment about something random, so to get some engagement going between us. But he doesn't see it as asking for connection and will just take my reaching out as the practical form of what I'm initiating. That is, he won't really respond, or just enough so I can not accuse him of being rude. But that distance makes me feel so worthless, like he does not love me, like he completely takes me for granted and doesn't value me. It feels deathly painful. This gets completely exacerbated when we're around people, even close family. My husband gets heavily focused on everyone around him and totally ignores me, unintentionally. Like if I say something, he might just glaze past me like I'm see-through, and if somebody else talks, he's all ears. He recently confessed to me that he feels very self-conscious to display intimate connection in public, and he has trouble showing any signs of affection in public, even just listening intently to when I'm talking or making eye contact. This is becoming so painful for me, especially as we get together with both sides of the family a lot, and I'm becoming increasingly shut down by his behavior. It literally kills me, makes me feel so invalid, unimportant, and small to him. It's coming to the point that I want to avoid family gatherings as I become so uptight by his public avoidance of me. He's nicer to his sister-in-law and her dog than his own wife. My background, I highly suspect. My mom has borderline personality disorder, although not formally diagnosed. She had severe mood swings when she was raising us kids, and treading on eggshells around her was in my bones. She could fly into a full rage where she was not so out of control, chasing after me or my siblings while yelling, "I'm going to beat you, I'm going to kill you." Oh dear. Once I literally had to run to a friend's home for a few hours. When I returned, my mom, now all calm, asked me plainly, "How come you were out for so long?" Completely forgetting her rage attack. It was all so very confusing. There was never food in the house. It was always dirty and heavily dysfunctional. You never knew where to find a simple item like a hairbrush or scissors. Everything was everywhere. Not having hot water for a shower was normal. Only owning bare minimum in everything was normal. Not having clean clothes, etc. I never had friends over, but luckily I did have good friends in later teenage years, which was a real blessing. Good. My mom was completely neglecting us physically and emotionally, of course. In the summer, we used to play with the neighbor kids my age, and I was so envious when their mom called them in for dinner and bath time. I used to watch their family get to eat a fresh meal every night and then lounge in their clean house with fresh pajamas and combed wet hair from their bath, after which they were put to bed. I totally get it. Yeah. Me, on the other hand, nobody called me in for dinner. There was no mother cooking, cleaning, asking how we are, bathing us, handing us fresh pajamas, and tucking us in at night. My mom and dad fought like cats and dogs with loud arguments about everything, like how much money to put in the gas meter and how much salt to put in the soup. There was never talking, only shouting. They're still together. My dad became the classic workaholic and was mostly out of the house. I do have occasional nice memories with him, but I definitely never had a strong relationship with him and felt like he was never really there for me. He was not the strong daddy figure I craved. I used to daydream as a child about the deeply intimate marriage I was going to have, the connection and love and adoration I craved so badly that I never got from my parents. In summary, my question is, how do I handle myself when my husband gets emotionally distant or avoidant when in public and around family? It's coming to the point now where it's really difficult to attend our frequent family gatherings as his avoidance completely throws me off and I'm an emotional wreck for the next few days. Am I the problem or is he, and what can I do about it? Also, occasional days like anniversary and birthdays have become a day of great tension as it leaves me completely wrecked for days, despite communicating multiple times of my need to be romanced and gifted. My husband will not see the significance of those days and do a really casual thing like go out to eat but without making me feel special or making a fuss, and gifts are rare. He claims I want Instagram romance that does not exist in real life. I say I just want him to tune in and pay attention to me, not so bland and simple. I'm starting to feel desperately unloved and resentful. Please help. Marilyn. Okay, Marilyn. All right. Yeah, you're married to an avoidant. That doesn't mean it's the end. It doesn't mean your happiness is gone forever. I think I can offer some help here. So the attachment style of avoidance is often something that sneaks up on those of us who were totally neglected as kids. We might have anxious attachment, right? Where we weren't very well cared for. Oh gosh, this thing about the other kids getting called in to eat nice dinner and bathed and put to bed, that sounds really nice to me. I get it. I hear you. I didn't have that either. And I remember, just even the food, just wishing I had that good food. And then we extend that to this idealized version of marriage. And maybe it's not idealized, but the deeply intimate marriage that we have seen on TV sometimes, that a few people have that kind of marriage that isn't actually many hours of each day, sort of disconnected, sort of tedious, sort of like real life. But yes, the ideal is deeply held and a good thing. And you want to be able to have that with your partner sometimes. And what you described was just like a classic avoidant. And so as I understand it, what an avoidant is somebody who the intimacy makes them really uncomfortable. They probably had to do without it as kids. They didn't get a ton of attention. And their adaptation, instead of getting, please love me, they got like, I've got this, I'm totally independent. So in a way, when you have anxious attachment, which you may, where you're just craving this attachment and it's making you miserable not to have it. And I think also going into the relationship where you're a little bit blind to the absence of that deep, intimate love that your standard is, going into it blind is kind of an anxious attachment thing to do. We get so overwhelmed with the presence of somebody who loves us and would marry us that, it's like it comes later. And this is a thing that can happen, is the dads, after the kid is born, there's a lot of stuff that changes in the marriage when there are little kids. You have 2 little kids. 2 little kids is a classic interrupter of intimacy and marriage and closeness. And there's a line in the movie Before Sunset, part of the Sunrise trilogy that I love so much, the films by Richard Linklater. And Ethan Hawke's character, when he reconnects with this old flame of his, he says, I feel like all we are now is business partners running a small nursery. And it is like that with small kids. It does tend to, squash the whole romantic dimension of the marriage that gets you into familyhood. And then you become this unit that's raising kids, getting money, keeping the house in order, getting the lunches, figuring out the childcare and the shoes and the laundry. And all that stuff fills up your life. And so it can be a very hard time for parents in their own way. And it's a reflection of a lot of what their wounding is too. So what you're describing sounds like something that may get better as the kids get older. It may improve. It also could get better if he's good-willed, and it sounds like he is, that he can work on it. This is the solution for a couple where one is avoidant, and really like the only way that a relationship with an avoidant lasts is if one of them is kind of insecure. Like worst case scenario, an avoidant who's not very loving and doesn't give nice gifts, like somebody who is securely attached, they might not be drawn to such a person. Somebody who's insecure attached is drawn because, well, there's just a stability there. They don't break up because the insecure person won't leave. And the one who is avoidant doesn't leave because they can't, their pickings are kind of slim too because of the limitations on what they can do. All right, that's the cynical view. But what if both types, there's a trauma wound there, there's a personality thing there. What if both types though? What if there is a sort of symbiosis there? And this is what I think. I think those of us who are insecure, we often tend to have like intense emotions. Maybe we didn't do so well in relationships because we expected so much. Well, somebody who's avoidant and sort of numbed out, they're immune. They can tolerate a lot of that sort of emotional intensity in us. Even though they don't like it and they pull away around emotions and demands, they can tolerate it better. They're sort of tough around it. So in a way, both people kind of fit. And that might be, I'm not going to say definitely that's what you have, but that it can be that way. It can be part of the dynamic that's difficult, but not the end of the world. All relationships have their difficulties, and I don't mean to minimize. An avoidant is not easy, but now that you have little kids, you have a high incentive to find a way to meet in the middle. And how an anxious person and an avoidant person, an anxious insecure attached, I should say, insecure and anxious, how they meet in the middle is, from your side, you need to be a little bit more flexible to be able to allow him to be who he is. You need to have friends and other support people. And you have these family people, and I think, friends. There's just no substitute for friends, of people who can help meet your emotional needs who aren't him, so that you're not just frustrated and sad all the time that your life lacks the love that you think has to come from him. It doesn't. We can sort of distribute our needs across several people, and it can work very well. What he needs to do to meet you in the middle, if he's willing, if he, I'm sure you've asked for it, but he needs to just sort of try a little harder. He needs to have the gift. He needs to remember that it's Valentine's Day or Mother's Day or your birthday or Christmas. And he needs to pay more attention to that. You can help him by telling him, what would be a great gift for me? I would really like to have this, tracker watch, or I would really like to have this set of garden pots, or you just let him, help him out. Avoidant people, their thinking just doesn't really go there very easily. And it can be a service to them to just tell them what would make you happy. So you have to meet in the middle. He can try harder to express love, but really what each individual in a relationship of any kind has to do ultimately is accept the person for who they are. In the end, you could leave the relationship, but that's extreme for parents of small children, very extreme. I think there's a lot of wiggle room here for you two to make an adjustment. I really feel for you. Having little kids, your needs are so great. You lose so much of, it's like life is just so intense and challenging that it would be so nice if somebody would just come and say, my darling, you've worked so hard today. Let me just hold you in my arms and rub your feet and I'll make the dinner. And yes, that would be lovely. But we don't always get all the lovely things that we could imagine having. And there it is. So just in case your husband sees this, I hope he hears meet in the middle. Would you give it a try? And for you, you can ask for what you want, and you can start dealing with the feelings that come up for you. You're bound, after the childhood you had, after not being cared for at all, it's got to hurt. I'm sure it's like a well of pain that opens that's very, very deep. So I relate to that. And what I'm going to point you towards is my daily practice technique. There needs to be a way for this feeling of pain and sadness to not be stuffed down or denied. We don't have to vent and scream and cry, but we also don't just deny that it's there. We can face it and have relief from the intensity of the emotions by writing them. And my technique is a very specific way to do that. It's really helpful for many, many people and not just me. And it helps us be at equilibrium more of the time. It helps us stay emotionally regulated. And that, for a parent, happens to be a golden zone that's very good for your kids too. When you're neurologically regulated and emotionally regulated, they will tend to co-regulate on you. This is what it feels like to fall for an avoidant. First, there's a strong feeling of connection, like the feeling you knew was possible, and you recognize it like you found home at last. Then you attach quickly while you can, because the signs that they can't love you back begin to appear immediately, but they don't look like red flags to you, because that incredible moment where they're right in front of you, but not quite with you, is like the most romantic feeling you've ever felt. Like it could happen. The potential, it's right there. Except you have felt it before. And if it keeps happening, one relationship after another, it means it's not just bad luck that you're with an avoidant, it's a pattern. Now, does it mean you're doomed to pine away for people who can't love you? My letter today is from a woman I'll call Laya, and she writes, "Hi, Anna. I can't get over this man, and I don't want to want him. I'm 42 years old now, too old for this behavior. All right, I've got my fairy pencil, and I'm going to go through and circle things I want to come back to on a second reading. But let's see what's going on in Lila's life right now. When I was 5, my older sister came forward to tell teachers that my dad had been abusing her. We were put in foster care, only for a few months, but it changed me profoundly. The other kids had a lot of problems and bullied me every day. Every morning when my sister left for school, I'd cry from separation anxiety, and they would make fun of me. And one morning I wouldn't eat my grits, and the foster mom locked me in a hot room with no food or water all day. I felt scared, alone, and really thirsty. I never really trusted adults after I came home, including my parents. My mom stayed with my dad for whatever trauma reason she had, and they argued all the time, mostly about money. He'd punch holes in the walls, and it scared everyone. Terrible anxiety weighed on my chest every day. I was afraid of my male teachers. I began drinking in 8th grade, and I did drugs in 10th grade and then on. I went to band competitions drunk. I still got great grades somehow. I wanted to be an adult so badly. I wanted to know everything so I could be free faster. I graduated in 3 years. My sister moved out on her 18th birthday. I moved out on my 19th. We fled. I ended up being hyper independent. I didn't ask for advice or help. I just watched the mistakes my sister and others made and decided not to make those mistakes too. I never cried in front of people. Criticism hurt. I aimed for perfection. Still, I developed a sense of humor over dark things. You sound a little like me. Okay. I've had a handful of serious relationships. In high school, a limerence, she says, oh, hell, an obsession lasted years, long after we broke up. He treated me like I didn't matter, and all I could think was how in love I was with him. Let me love you, I thought. And as an adult, I thought it was just young hormonal feelings. Then I was with an alcoholic for 9 awful years. Then 3 years with a clinically diagnosed narcissist before it became a trend word. Yeah, I was into narcissists before it was cool. The damage he did was the worst of all my traumas. He was overly critical, possessive, controlling. He alienated my friends until it was just us. I left him. I was so incredibly depressed and ill. Turns out I had undiagnosed a serious autoimmune disease. I worked harder than anyone else at work. I got promotions almost annually, and I stayed single for 3 years, just dating. Then I found safety in an avoidant. No fighting, no yelling, no expectations. I see the elegance here. No drinking or drug abuse. He was committed to being a boyfriend after 3 months of dating. What I didn't understand was that was all it was ever going to be. For 6 years, I've had space to heal and grow, and I've come a long way with abandonment issues. I'm not very angry about my childhood anymore. He had my trust, and I thought he was the one. When I got diagnosed and lost my job because I was so sick, I asked my avoidant to move into my condo. He refused several times. I never asked for anything from anyone for exactly this fear. I couldn't believe he could turn me down when I actually needed to have help, physically and financially. If he loved me, how could he say no? I would have for him without giving it a thought. It felt like a stab to the chest. All those feelings from when I was a kid came back, that male partners can't be trusted for anything. So I told him I was moving away to somewhere less expensive. He then said he wanted to live with me and insisted on moving in. He resented me for the next year. We'll come back to that. I gave him the office as his man cave. He spent every waking moment in there, emerging only for food and sex. I tried to talk to him about spending time together, reconnecting, but he was too avoidant to participate in the conversation. I felt like a houseplant, unnoticed and wanting water, the bare minimum. We broke up eventually. I ended up reconnecting with an old friend I always had a crush on. He's successful, intelligent, and kind. He told me I was the one that got away. Well, the plot's thickening here. He told me I was so special, smart, and hot, and how the others aren't like me. Does anyone feel like something bad is about to happen? How amazing we would be together. We could run a business together. He was newly single like me. I was head over heels. We were both walking red flags, honestly. We spent hours talking. I felt seen. But if something intimate happened in conversation or in an email or spending time together, he would pull away the next day. Hot, then cold, over and over. And it made me behave poorly. I was a little pick-me girl saying that phrase to him. I'm so embarrassed. I kept texting with him, but his responses became less engaged. I'm sure he got an ego boost from me pining for him, so he would check in on me and we would start talking again. It was beginning to make me feel awful about myself. I can see so many reasons why we won't work. I could see, I think. I stopped texting him and blocked him on social media. He hasn't texted me either. I can't bring myself to block his number because maybe, just maybe, he will get it together and be what fake version of himself I think he could be. You said it, yep. I've tried to reroute my thinking when he pops in, focus on me and my plans. I wrote a whole list of cons, so when I doubt my decision of cutting him off, I can read and remind myself. The cons are deal breakers. I want a partner who wants to be my partner. Rule number 1. But this guy obviously doesn't. It's been over 3 months of no contact. I haven't felt this strongly for someone since high school. Just let me love you. I want to kick him off this pedestal I built, but it just doesn't happen. Logic doesn't seem to be working on me. I still want this cowardly man who doesn't even like cats. Ridiculous. Help. What am I missing? I don't want him anymore. And that's from Lila. All right, Lila, thank you for this letter. Boy, I relate a lot to what you're going through here, and I know a lot of people do too. So let's go through, and we'll go through what you told me and what I circled here. So yeah, there's a history of the worst kind of abuse in your family, and that right there just sends kids into a detachment or dissociation. You know, I'm not a therapist, but I know from experience, and I know from all my sisters and brothers of all my life, you know, of my friends and people here at Crappy Childhood Fairy, I know how this plays out. I see the patterns. And it really does a number on the ability to have relationships until we can really, you know, face it and find a different way forward. I'm going to say right now that one of the phrases that I always find alienating in trauma videos and literature is that you just need to heal that trauma, or when you have unprocessed trauma, or they talk about it like it's this automatic thing that you can do and then it'll be gone. And, you know, the people who are still struggling with trauma, they just haven't done the thing yet. But it's not one thing. It's not just like one thing that fixes everything. There's a way of life that we go forward. There's a way that we start to become more real and more honest with ourselves and more supported by people who are safe for us, which is usually not the dating people we would date, you know, but to have a little bit of community with people who can love and support us and hang out with us so that we're not haunted and chased by the pack of wolves called loneliness, where you'll just put up with anything from somebody who treats you like this. Like, you know, that's the number it does on your mind, isn't it? So this thing with your sister and going into foster care, I'm so sorry. That's such a major trauma. And yeah, you felt scared and alone, and that thing where that foster mom, not a mom, you know, some sort of foster person, locked you in a hot room with no food and water all day. I'm so sorry that happened to you. How terrifying, you know, what a wedge that put between you and your trust for the world. So you never really trusted adults or parents. No, of course not. And mom stayed with dad. They argued. He punched holes in the walls, and, you know, it was scary. I know I grew up in a house where there was punching and violence, and you never knew what was going to set people off. There was alcohol. You're afraid of male teachers. And then you started drinking, you started doing drugs, and you moved out. And, you know, one thing I think you didn't mention, am I missing it? Are you sober? Did you find that necessary to get sober? I just usually, I don't know, when people have attachment wounds, even if they don't have a tendency to drink too much or use drugs too much or have flat out addiction and alcoholism, even then, sometimes, you know, what a friend said to me is, you have no business drinking alcohol. And I'm not an alcoholic, like not even close. I just don't have that thing. But when I drink, my judgment is not as good, and my defenses are down, and I'm more likely to lose my emotional composure, either, you know, jumping into a relationship or lashing out at somebody I care about. So when this friend told me, you have no business drinking alcohol, this was a supportive friend, a mentor, in fact, you know, when I said, do you think I should stop drinking? So I didn't drink for 8 years, and very carefully did I decide to try it again. And I found out that If everything is a totally safe situation, it might be okay for me to have alcohol. If anything is weird, or I'm scared or anxious, or I don't trust people, is not a good idea. I've never liked feeling like, like I'm losing sovereignty over my emotions and my boundaries. So that's just something for you to think about. If I missed that, I'm sorry. Maybe it'll come up again as we go. But you were doing a lot of drugs and drinking, and you moved out, and you ended up being hyper independent. And that's like, yeah, when you're young, that's like so good. Good for you. And then it's just kind of hard to really bond with anybody who's emotionally available. When you have that going on, it's like a steel wall that repels people. You couldn't cry in front of people. Criticism was very harmful, and you were trying to be perfect. You had perfectionism, and you would laugh at dark things, which I also think it's a great coping mechanism. But yeah, it can be a way of deflecting really deep consideration of problems and what to do. So you had a handful of serious relationships. One with limerence, lasted for years. He treated you like you didn't matter, and all you could do was just be madly in love with him. And so that's the thing, that's limerence in action. And I think maybe, just maybe, when you hear me say it, it's like you can always recognize it in other people. It's harder in yourself. But when you have that impulse to be like, just love me, just let me love you, like you describe it here. When you have that for somebody who's treating you badly, it's the trauma talking. And the sooner you can just remind yourself that and say, I'm having that thought that I have because I had trauma. This is not the same as love. I have experienced love. I have loved people. I've been loved. This is not that. When somebody is treating me badly, it's not love. And only my trauma thinks this is something I should try to get more of. Only my trauma thinks that. And who even knows why? Some people try to explain it away. It's a mystery to me. Like the way that we behave around love is complicated. It comes from somewhere very deep and primal, and so it doesn't always make sense, and it can't always be linked exactly to what happened to you. It's just, you can treat it as a symptom. You can treat it as a symptom that's creating problems in your life, and you need a way to work around it. Just be like, that's the trauma symptom where I try to win the love of somebody who's not into me. And then you consciously, it's not popular, is it? But you can deflect those thoughts. It's not easy to control your thoughts, but it's worth a try. It's always worth a try. And sometimes I think like the helping professions, they're too soft on us with that one. They're, it's just like, well, how can you help it with your trauma? It's like, but you must help it. You must, and the way that you were hyper independent and strong and got out of your house after 3 years in high school, I did too, 3 years, it's not easy. Well, that's the strength we need to get over those irrational thoughts that draw us to sick situations that are only going to drain our life force out. Somebody has to do it. And so sometimes it has to be this like part of ourselves that stands outside the horrible longing. It goes, my girl, you cannot do this. We're going to shut it down. We're going to not think about it, not talk about it, and not keep going. So this is an old relationship you were talking about. So I digressed, but it's worth mentioning. Okay, so then you were with a clinically diagnosed narcissist. It's like you kind of went through all the ways that people can be really difficult and unavailable. And it's kind of interesting because your experience actually is rich with information about like, how does a really neglected and abandoned kid grow up and respond to lack of availability? In a weird way, somebody who's not available, it's a weird kind of safety. And, if you have this, I think you'll know what I mean. You're not safe. Everything ends up falling apart. You lose all your money. You become miserable. You get stigmatized for all the, problems in your life. There's many downsides, but in a weird way, it doesn't require that you show up at a level you've never had before. And it feels terrifying to do that sometimes. And when people used to say, I just, I would love you, but I can't because I'm scared. I used to think, well, I think that that's like a way that people sugarcoat that they're not into you. And I think that's actually true. But there is this fear that if we were with somebody who had it basically together, our faults and the things that we're ashamed of in ourselves would become very obvious, and sooner or later we would get rejected for them, and it would be so awful that we couldn't survive it. Like that's the thought, right? So, you go with these people who are kind of messed up. And then if it all breaks down, you think, well, good riddance. It's not like, It doesn't have that existential threat feeling to it, even though anybody with an abandonment wound, it all feels like an existential threat. Even thinking, I don't like this person, I'm going to leave, feels like an existential threat. It can trigger that whole like terrible, like deep, dark abandonment melange depression that comes up. You know, when you have been abandoned, getting put in foster care, there's your, you know, there it is. Okay. Then you found safety in an avoidant. And I joked, I said, oh, I like the elegance of that. No fighting, no yelling, no expectations. It's like respite. It's like a little place to rest, a bench that you can sit on during a long hike and have a cup of tea. But then after 3 years, he didn't want to be anything more. It was never going to change. He was committed to being a boyfriend after 3 months of dating. So he was just ready to be in a sort of like autopilot mode there with you. And you didn't know that was all it was ever going to be. So for 6 years, you had space to heal and grow. I know what you mean. I know how a boring relationship can be a space to heal and grow. Like a certain part of our anxiousness is resolved. Somebody's there. Somebody's in the seat next to us. So you've come a long way. And you're not so angry about that, about your childhood anymore. And you trusted him and you thought he was the one. But then when you got diagnosed and lost your job because of your autoimmune disease, which of course autoimmune diseases are quite common for traumatized people. We're way more prone to them than non-traumatized people. You asked him to move in and help you and he just wouldn't do it. He just wouldn't do it. And you had never asked for anyone because exactly this fear. Yeah, well, you know, we're not crazy when we fear asking for help because some part of us knows that we're with people who are just not going to do it, even though other people out there are the type. We haven't managed to bond with them, so we don't have it. So I couldn't believe he would turn me down when I actually needed to have help. There's the cognitive dissonance. You know, he's an avoidant, but I can't believe he avoids me when I need help. But there it is. And you needed the help physically and financially. And if he loved me, how could he say no? Exactly. You would have done it for him without a thought, of course. And it felt like a stab to the chest. And all those feelings from when you were a kid came back. And the male partners can't be trusted for anything. Yeah, I understand. So I told him I was moving away to somewhere less expensive. And then he said he wanted to live with me and insisted on moving in. And then he did it resentfully. And so there it is. You can kind of trick an avoidant. There was that thing. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. You can manipulate an avoidant to move in with you, but you can't make them feel happy about it. And there it is. You even gave him the office as a man cave. That thing where you said he only came out for food and sex. I couldn't help laughing, even though I know this is like not funny, but it's just kind of like, oh my gosh, you know, like even a squirrel comes out for more than that, you know, sometimes. So it's very sad. And you tried talking to him about spending time together, reconnecting, but he couldn't even have the conversation. So you got your experience, feeling like a houseplant. And I'm proud of you for getting your experience. And eventually you broke up. But sometimes part of our healing is we have to get our answers. Like, yes, there's a certain kind of low friction with somebody who's avoidant, or drama, right? Inner drama, but low friction around the house. And we get our experience, and that's how we grow. Like, the trouble with trauma when we're kids is our development just gets so thwarted. We don't get to fully develop and mature. And so we have these like blind spots that are pretty hard to deal with. And your experience is how you move through that. And you did. So then you say, I ended up reconnecting with an old friend. Okay, here, enter this guy, the love bomber. And he was great and everything. He was so hot and smart. And, you know, he kept saying how amazing everything would be and you could run a business, and he was newly single, and you went head over heels. And so you tell me here, we were both walking red flags, honestly. So that's kind of how we roll, right? I think when we're further along the healing journey, when somebody like thinks all that stuff like right out of the gate, we know something's not right. You have to get to know people to know if they're great. So you spent hours talking, you felt seen, but anytime things got closer, he'd pull away the next day. He was hot and then cold. And it kept happening and happening and happening. And I'm sure that was just devastating and exhausting. And it made you behave poorly, yes.
And you said, I'm the literal pick me girl saying that phrase to him. And I'm so embarrassed. Well, you're among friends now. There's no shame in having a very normal reaction to trauma, in being kind of like blindsided by people who can be manipulative like that. It's normal to have that blind spot after the way that you grew up. That's normal. There's nothing wrong with you. I know it feels shameful. And there's that idea like you're playing a fool by loving somebody who can't love you back. We're not foolish. We're struggling with wounds of trauma. And because you're here, you're writing to me, you're working on it in all these positive ways, there's nothing foolish at all about this. This is you getting your experience with the edges of the wounds of your trauma dictating the limits of the relationships that you could have. But trust me, everything's changing. Everything's evolving now. I mean, the fact that you're writing to me and allowing me to read this on the channel is a lot of courage and a lot of willingness to hear new information. So I hope I can give you useful things here. I will try. So of course you were feeling awful about yourself. So you kept texting him, but his responses were less and less engaged. You said, I'm sure he got an ego boost from me pining for him. And that's possible. I know that. I've thought that before about people in my life as well. But sometimes the more I learn about avoidance, the more I just think, I don't know. I don't know what they're feeling. You know, they're like, I don't know if it's a payoff or an ego thing. I don't know. They're a mystery. But, well, I guess the thing where he was love bombing you it's not like automatically attached to avoidance. It sounds like anxious avoidant, where somebody like really wants the relationship and then can't deal with it. And that's really hard. And so you said, I can see so many reasons why it can't work. And you stopped texting him and you blocked him. Good. And he hasn't texted you. Good. And I love what you said. I can't bring myself to block his number because maybe, just maybe, he will get it together and be what fake version of himself I think he could be. And that's, I know you're just like, you're smiling with me about that. It's like, I know, girl. Yes, we do that. The fake version of themselves that we know they could be if they only loved us, right? And maybe if they would let us love them, they would be that. I know. But when we say it out loud to each other, we can just kind of hear, oh yeah, that can't be right. Yeah. I've tried to reroute my thinking when he pops in, to focus on me and my plans. Good, all good. I write a whole list of cons, so when I doubt my decision of cutting it off, I can read and remind myself. The cons are deal breakers. I want a partner who wants to be my partner is the rule one, and he clearly doesn't. So he can't be the one. In the most utmost spiritual sense, a person who is called to be with you can be with you and will be with you. So this always, if them not being around always is the sign. Sometimes, and I'll just say for the benefit of other people, sometimes true love is a winding path. But I think this terrible cold treatment of you is not that kind of thing. You haven't felt so strongly since high school when you were limerent before. And, you don't want, you know logically that this isn't right. So yes, it is the trauma talking. So here's what I'm going to say to you. Three things that you can do that are very strong to do about this. And if you listen to letters on my channel, what you are describing is so normal for kids who were abused when they were kids and emotionally neglected. Is this weird way the attachment gets stronger when somebody treats us badly. It's a maladaptation. We're not doing it on purpose. We're not crazy. It's just something going on with our emotions and our dopamine, and it's not right. And we need all hands on deck to sort of deal with it for what it is. When the cognitive information is there, this guy's not into you, he's not being good to you, he's not available. You pull out all the stops and you do everything. No talking about them, no thinking about them, no looking at social media to see if you can figure out what's going on with them. And then I use, and I encourage you to use, my daily practice techniques. And those are, it's a specific writing technique to get all the feelings out of your head and heart twice a day and ask for them to be removed and then rest your mind. You just do some rest to let your mind put itself back together. A lot of the way that trauma affects us is actually physiological. It's neurological. It's in our nervous system, and we need a way to process our thoughts and feelings so that they don't just sit there forever like, why can't I stop loving this guy? Why can't I stop? Why can't I stop? It's like because you haven't processed. And what does that mean? You know, people just throw that around. I think we need to process our feelings. What is it? But I'll tell you what it means here in Crappy Childhood Fairy. It means converting something that's a charged memory or experience or feeling, no matter how long ago it was, into a memory. It becomes a memory that's more neutral. So if somebody said, what happened with that guy? You can go, oh, well, I got really obsessed and then I made some changes and I don't know what ended up happening with him. Versus, what happened with that guy? Oh gosh, here comes all the feelings again. You know, that's a charged feeling. So it's unprocessed. That's a good enough definition, right? I'm sure the therapists and psychologists could give you something deeper than that. And I could too if I read out of things, but just my experience of it is the emotion just hijacks your physiology and your endocrine system. You've got adrenaline over it, you've got cortisol, or you've got oxytocin and dopamine going, you know. You're just having this whole reaction as if it's happening right now, and you can't stop it. It loops and loops and loops. That is the nature of PTSD. So we interrupt it. We do whatever we have to do. We can use emergency measures to step out of it, like cold exposure, hot exposure, eye movement desensitization, little exercises where you move your eyes in an infinity symbol with your eyes closed while you slowly think about something that's troubling you. You can do these things to help your brain and nervous system just come back and sort of latch on to the transmission again so you can go again. Because it just, you know, I'm thinking of these transmission or the chain on the bicycle, you know, it just comes off because of these wounds. I like metaphors if you haven't noticed. So we need to like re-engage and stop having this looping thought and think of it as a mechanical problem. All right, there are many things that you can do about it. Why do I still want this cowardly man who doesn't even like cats? I love your sense of humor. I love your darkness and your lightness. It's very nice, Lila. And I think you're like this close to getting totally free of this pattern. So I was telling you, you need a writing technique. That was the one thing. The other two things that are going to help you kind of get over that hill and start to get into a new habit is you need to have fun. It's really easy to obsess on somebody when you've sort of withdrawn from the world and it seems like it was the only fun thing. It was the only time I felt connected to people. It was the only time that I could really feel the breeze on my face and the wind in my hair, you know? And so you need to be having those experiences as a single person with friends often and by yourself. But you need to start having the joyful experiences of life. And that way it starts to gradually, you know, disinvest all hopes in this one person to bring you the good things in life. Many good experiences are possible. So have fun. That's part of my, you know, prescription pad for you. Obviously, I don't prescribe, I don't treat anything, but I'm just telling you, you know, is withdraw from obsessive thoughts and stuff. Discipline yourself. Have fun. And the third thing is, okay, there's a fourth thing really. You need tools to process your thoughts. So that's the third thing. I really recommend the daily practice to you. The link to it is down in the description section, along with all my courses. That's also on my website. The final thing is to have people who you can hang out with, who get it, people who support you. If you watch my videos, I talk about this all the time. I can't say enough about it. I know that so many of us are isolated right now. And if you have some relationships, I know a lot of them are only this deep. You can't talk to them about what's really going on. But you know who you can talk about? A therapist, of course. But you can talk to people who have walked this road too, or are in the middle of it right now. You'll find them in 12-step programs. You'll find them in study groups. You'll find them in my membership program. That's like, we've just spent years crafting this place where people can do the daily practice and work on tools together. And then we moderate that group so that it's like people are all on the same page about like what we do share, what we don't do to each other. Like we don't criticize. We don't share explicitly about bad things that happen. We can mention it. We don't give unsolicited advice. We don't even talk about world affairs and politics in our membership program. And it's dynamite. There's so much life there. There's so much love and friendship there. you'd be most welcome to join us. And so the link to how to become a member is down below too. What I want to leave you with is a list of red flags that I've stuck on a simple document, just so that you can have it with you. When you meet somebody and you go, I'm feeling the feeling about this person, I'm catching feelings, you can just like check yourself, go to the ladies' room or the gents' room, whoever the case may be, and read your list of red flags. It doesn't matter what your avoidant partner tells you. If they are giving you the silent treatment, storming out, going AWOL for days or weeks at a time with no explanation, they are emotionally abusing you. And if you're left feeling obsessed and frantic for little crumbs of communication from them, I'm going to send you a lifeline to tell you your trauma wounds have been activated. And from here on out, it's going to be very hard to find any peace or happiness unless the whole dynamic of your relationship changes. Now, I'm not a therapist, and what I'm going to tell you about stonewalling can't take the place of professional help. But I am someone who learned how to heal this toxic relationship dynamic in my own life, both sides of it, so that real love and trust can grow. My letter today is from a woman I'll call Bryn, and she writes, Dear Anna, I think I've developed a trauma bond with my boyfriend due to his habit of stonewalling after arguments. I want to make sense of whether I'm being a little delusional for still trying to make the relationship work despite these toxic patterns. All right, I've got my pink fairy pencil here. I'm going to go through and circle things I want to come back to on a second reading, but let's go through Bryn's letter and hear what's going on. I'm 26 years old, and I've been in an on and off relationship with my 42-year-old boyfriend for 2 years now. The relationship is amazing. He would give me so much attention, message me often, and organize road trips for us. The greatest problem for us is how we handle conflict. A fight will always start off with me being moody. I am a naturally really bubbly person, but when I get hungry or had a long day or week, etc., I can get quiet and snappy. He would sense my mood change and immediately get very angry and defensive. He blames me for ruining his peace and bringing negativity into his day, claiming that whatever is causing me to be upset is not worth it. This causes my emotions to become dysregulated, and we end up in a fiery fight with yelling and me crying. And after the fight, he would become quiet for days. He would ignore all my calls and messages or attempts to talk. During the stonewalling, I get really upset and desperate. I'm also always the one who reaches out and apologizes. After we reconcile, it's almost like a weight has been lifted from my shoulders and like the fight never happened. We go back to normal, really loving, etc., until the next fight. And toward the end of the first year, the fights became more frequent and would end up in him saying we should break up. But we would always reconcile. And one time he went silent for a month and a half. Oh. Eventually, I took it as a sign to move on. I started seeing someone else. The boyfriend came back and begged for me to go back to him. He promised he would change and that he won't stonewall again. So I went back to him. In the beginning, he tried hard to change, but as time went on, the fights started happening again, and so did the silent treatment. He rationalizes that it takes him a long time to process his emotions and to calm down again. We'll come back to that. He had a very rough upbringing, and I think he has a lot of childhood trauma. His dad died when he was very young. His mom often neglected him due to work commitments, and at 16, he was kicked out of home by his stepfather due to a misunderstanding. He doesn't really have a lot of close friends or family, so I don't think he has a lot of support outside of me. I find the stonewalling very hard to tolerate. I end up so consumed by my thoughts that I get very upset. I can't focus on anything but trying to resolve the argument. I know he loves me a lot, and I love him a lot too. And friends and family advise me to leave because of the stonewalling and how it affects me. But I can't seem to do it. I think I may have developed a trauma bond, and I can't get out of this cycle of highs and lows. I'm not sure if it's the trauma bond talking, but I really want the relationship to work, despite all the highs and lows that it has brought me over the last 2 years. Outside of the stonewalling, he is sweet, caring, and funny guy. I would really appreciate if I could get your opinion on this, fairy. Many thanks. Bryn. All right. Yeah, I think I can help here. So I'm just going to go through and read some things you told me, Bryn. First of all, there's a big age difference, which is interesting. You're 26, he's 42. You've been together for 2 years. The relationship is amazing, so much attention, but the conflict comes up. So I'm guessing that what he is somebody with an avoidant attachment style that he doesn't have very good workarounds for. And I'm not trying to excuse it, because I said at the beginning of this video, stonewalling and refusing to speak to somebody and just ghosting them like that, it's emotional abuse. And I would say any one of those like really hurtful behaviors that he did is justification enough for you to end the relationship. No matter how you rationalize what he did, it comes down to how does it affect you? Is this relationship lifting you up into an even better version of yourself than you would be without him? And the answer is no, it's tearing you apart. So right there, that is the writing on the wall. You know, sometimes people where there's an avoidant in the relationship, and you didn't tell me anything about your background, but maybe you have an insecure attachment style. Maybe you've done this before where you've become very attached to somebody who jerks you around, who withdraws love from you, and maybe you develop that. It's not uncommon that people who were like had an alcoholic parent, for example, like I did, you know, they'll be totally great one day and then later that day, they're totally absent. They're angry at you for no reason. They're not taking care of you. There's no food. So we get primed by that kind of treatment to get into this type of relationship and tolerate it as adults. But it can happen at any time. A trauma bond, you've correctly described it. It's the other word for it is intermittent reinforcement. So you can intentionally manipulate somebody, and this is done like in hostage situations and torture of prisoners, where you give them all kinds of kindness and love. You're great, you're great, you're great, and then you yank it away. And then you give it back and you yank it away, and it's kind of random, and you'll leave the person thinking, oh, somehow I caused this. It must have been because I had a bad day or whatever. And, you know, I don't doubt that maybe you get moody or maybe you have bad days and you're difficult and it's unpleasant for him, but it's that he stonewalls you. So we'll talk about avoidance and what they can do in a minute. This can happen at any time, and I have just noticed that even rats get it, even dogs get intermittent reinforcement reactions where they become trauma bonded, where I often use this analogy, if you've ever seen like a shelter dog who gets treated very badly and simultaneously will wag its tail and make a little smile like love me, but they're like peeing on the floor. And I'm not saying you're peeing on the floor. Whenever I use this analogy, I want to say that. And I'm not saying you're a dog, but I'm just saying it's not that we're crazy, it's that we're living things, we're creatures. And the attachment is, the urge to attach to people and the mechanism in our nervous system for doing that is so strong that it will kick on even stronger sometimes when the love is periodically taken away for random reasons. And it's very unfortunate. I think that people who were not traumatized as kids have a little bit more immunity to it. They can sort of, like if somebody, you know, jerks them around or, you know, just blames them for everything and takes off and doesn't speak to them for a month and a half, they wouldn't want to take that person back. They would go, that's terrible. I want to be with somebody who's totally there for me, who will explain to me when they're frustrated, where we can talk it out, which is what I know you want that too. But what I see is that you are not able to stand up for what you want and need and what anybody would want and need. And there's this like very bad estimation of yourself that's developing in your consciousness because of this. And, you know, why is that? I've read books by psychologists who say it's because kids blame themselves for their parents' lack of love or neglect and take it on themselves. Maybe you had that. But whatever happened when you were a kid and whatever hasn't been healed from that, you still need a workaround today to take care of present day Bryn, of 26-year-old Bryn, who's in a relationship with a guy who makes you feel terrible and feeling like you can't leave. Like you decide to leave, your friends and family say leave, but you feel like you can't. So yes, trauma bond. And also there's a word for when you can't leave, and it's often, it's something that the therapist Pete Walker just calls abandonment melange. So if there was a real abandonment in your past, sometimes there's an intense emotional reaction that's bigger than the average person. I don't know. I don't know if that happened in your past or this is surely from psychological torture of the on-again, off-again relationship. And it doesn't sound like it was you who kept turning it off. You kept allowing it to come back on. And I think that psychologically there is a part of us that we just can't really rationalize that unless we believe that we did something wrong and will be so good that we can stop it from happening again. But the evidence is here. It just keeps happening. So if you're asking my opinion, Bryn, yeah, I think this is not great. Stonewalling is a terrible thing. Now, if he wanted to, and you can tell him this if you want, but I would encourage you not to make it your life project, to make him change if he's not interested. But a person with avoidant attachment style is often somebody who is a bit introverted or who needs some downtime and alone time and gets overwhelmed when somebody else is emotional, right? Which some of us are. And they get overwhelmed and they don't have very good tools for how to gracefully handle that, to go, I'm sorry you're feeling really bad. I do care. I will talk to you about this, but could I take a break? I'm just feeling kind of overwhelmed right now. Or they can come up with more veiled ways of saying it, like, could I just take a pause? I'm about to go meditate, and then we can talk about this. There's a kind and loving way to take your leave from somebody who is being overwhelming, if you want a relationship with them. So I'm saying for anybody who's the avoidant one here, or who's stonewalling. And stonewalling is, I learned about it from the really good work of the Gottman Institute. The Gottmans are a married couple who came up with this. It's a model for how to communicate in a relationship. And I think it's the best thing I've found out there. And my husband and I find it helpful, even though we can't really do it perfectly. But it's a really good idea. And they call it the 4 horsemen for ruining relationships. And it is complaints, criticism, contempt, and stonewalling. So stonewalling is a big enough deal that it's right up there with contempt. And they have observed that in couples that have been together for whatever amount of time, they can predict if there's contempt, that's the most toxic one, that if they're doing that, the relationship may not have much time left. And so if you're having any of those 4 behaviors going on and they're hurting the other person, it's time to change it. So if your boyfriend cares to change it, he could take a look into this. You guys could look at the Gottman thing. But, here's what we do. We do all the reading. We buy the books. We write to the Crappy Childhood Fairy for but he's the one who's doing this. Maybe you have a problem that you want to work on. But at this point, it doesn't matter what your issues are, because if somebody is just like running away from you and not speaking to you for a month and a half, that is not the one for you. And our healing doesn't, we don't have to get with the perfect person to heal. And we don't have to be healed to get into a good relationship. They tend to happen together. And sometimes we're going to have some relationships that don't work out very well along the way. And it's so painful when you had childhood trauma. It's so, just so destructive to the order in your life to have a relationship end. That's the abandonment melange. But it has to happen. It has to happen if we're going to be okay. And so to be okay, we have to find a way to leave relationships that are no good. And there's a little step in between absolutely leaving and slamming the door. There's stepping away and allowing information to come to you rather than running around and apologizing, go, sorry, it was me, please can we talk? When somebody hurts you, you can let go and you can move on. Sometimes you might even have to fake it that you've moved on, because you'll want to call. There's that natural inclination, like, let me just get this fired up again. Maybe I can make it work. Maybe if I blame myself enough or read the right book or get him to read the right book. It's not ideal. You want to find somebody who actually just you feel pretty good with them, and having them in your life has definitely made life better. That's the dream. That's what we're going for. And if somebody's showing you again and again that they cannot do that for you, they're showing you what the rest of your life would be like if you stay. And I have a feeling, though, that somebody like this boyfriend of yours wouldn't stay anyway. Like, sooner or later, he's going to have to leave. But who knows? Maybe he's willing to work on it. Whether he does or he doesn't, here's what I'm going to recommend to you, Bryn. You need a great life. You need a life that's fun and full of love and connection and things to do on weekends, so that you never have to tolerate icky behavior and bad treatment from anybody. The minute you feel like, I'd be happier just hanging out with my friends this weekend, you have infinite riches. You have this great protection from having to put up with terrible treatment from anybody. You have somewhere to go. And I can't tell you enough what a big difference that makes. The trouble with relationships that are trauma-driven is we probably went into them kind of not that connected to other people. But once we have a significant other, we're like, oh, phew, I can stop trying to have connections with other people. I don't know if that's true for you, but it was for me. And that's a key component to have a good relationship, is to have many good relationships at the same time. I don't mean dating, but I mean friends and people you do fun things with and care about, and they care about you. And a nice place to meet people is in any kind of thing where people are working together to try to make their lives better. If it's all along the same lines, like in a 12-step program, great. Or the membership program that I lead, we have like 2,000 people there. They're all working on healing trauma symptoms, and maybe half of them, the trauma definitely affects the way they're dating or having relationships. So they support each other in that. There are therapy groups, there are meetups, but maybe those are a little bit anonymous. There are friend groups of people who do this. What's not helpful is connecting with people, friends, who are very opinionated and have difficulties in their own life. The best person to get support from is somebody who's really committed to their own healing. Maybe they're in a really healthy relationship that you admire right now. Maybe they're single, but they're not in a sick relationship, because there's just, when we are in a sick relationship, and I totally say we, because I've been in them, when you're in one, it's very hard to think clearly, and it's very easy to project on other people and go, oh, you should get out. Men are horrible. That's not helpful when you're trying to figure yourself out. So much of healing is about coming to your own answer. So that's why I also say you need tools. You need tools that help you be very attuned to yourself and hear that small voice of like, who are you really? What do you really want in your life? What do you really want in the relationship you eventually have? What does that feel like, being with that hypothetical person? Is this anything like that? Like if you're in the middle of constant drama and trauma, you don't have access to that still small voice that reminds you of who you are and what's right for you. So it's really easy to just get jerked around like a bull with a ring in its nose. I'll just go wherever the pain stops for 5 minutes, even if it's going to hurt me more. You know what I mean? So with that, if you think that you are vulnerable to romantic manipulation from somebody who jerks you back in all the time and then gets rid of you, I have a list of things that romantic manipulators do that you can keep in your purse or in your pocket with you when you go out, to try to teach yourself not to fall for it anymore, to hold your boundaries with that.